the air was thick with fear. Uncertainty and distrust were palpable in every corner. The world was still recovering from the horrors of World War II. The scars of war were visible in the destroyed cities and in the hearts of the people. But, as we'll see in this video, we are still in those shadows. Even today we can't escape the economic pit we fell into as humanity. Friedrich Hayek, an economist who witnessed the rise of fascism firsthand, issued a serious warning, still relevant today. His words resonated in a Europe seeking to rebuild itself. He believed that excessive government control over the economy was not only inefficient, but dangerous. Bureaucracy, according to Hayek, could become a tool of oppression. For Hayek, economic freedom was inseparable from political freedom. Without one, the other could not flourish. He argued that centralized planning, even when well-intentioned, could pave the way to tyranny. History was full of examples of how absolute power corrupts absolutely. His fears resonated deeply in the shadow of totalitarian regimes. The images of dictators and their parades were a constant reminder of the dangers of concentrated power. Hayek's ideas found fertile ground in the post-war era. Economic reconstruction and growth were seen as proof of the effectiveness of the free market. The West, led by the United States, adopted free market capitalism as a bulwark against communism. The narrative of economic prosperity became a symbol of freedom. But Hayek's warnings went beyond the struggle between East and West. His concerns were universal and timeless. He warned against the seductive power of government intervention in all its forms. The temptation to surrender freedoms in exchange for security was a constant danger. He argued that even in democracies, the unchecked expansion of state power could erode individual liberties and ultimately lead to oppression through all its institutions, for example, tax offices or customs. Constant vigilance and the defense of freedom were essential to avoid falling into the shadow of dictatorship. Hayek's main idea was simple but powerful. He believed that a free market economy, with very little government involvement, was the best way to protect individual freedom. In his view, the system of prices acted like an invisible hand, coordinating the actions of millions of people and businesses. This decentralized system, he argued, was much more efficient and innovative than any centrally planned economy. Hayek also saw a clear link between economic freedom and political freedom. When people are free to make their own economic choices, they depend less on the government. This economic independence, he argued, encourages self-reliance and resistance to tyranny. On the other hand, a society where the government controls production can easily fall into dictatorship. Hayek's warnings about the dangers of unchecked government power were especially relevant when it came to the issue of land ownership. Hayek strongly believed that land wasn't just another resource that could be bought and sold without consequences. Land, he argued, wasn't just another commodity, it was the foundation upon which all economic activity took place. Without access to land, economic opportunities were severely limited. As such, he believed that the concentration of land ownership in the hands of a few posed a serious threat to both economic and political freedom. This concentration could lead to disproportionate control over society. Hayek was especially worried about the phenomenon of land speculation. This practice, he argued, artificially inflated land prices, making it increasingly difficult for ordinary people to afford a place to live or start a business. Speculation created an insurmountable barrier for many. The result, he believed, was a society torn apart by inequality, where a small elite held absolute sway over economic and political power. This elite could dictate the living conditions for the majority, perpetuating a cycle of poverty and exclusion. Despite this staunch opposition to land speculation, Hayek doesn't tell us how we could abolish it. And this omission is perhaps his greatest failing. Yet in the decades after World War II, Hayek's ideas about the importance of free markets gained wide acceptance. His theories influenced global economic policy, promoting deregulation and a smaller role for government in the economy. Governments around the world embarked on ambitious privatization programs, selling state-owned companies and assets in the name of economic efficiency. This movement promised greater competitiveness and economic growth. While privatization brought some benefits, it also had unintended consequences, even for Mr. Hayek himself, particularly in the area of land ownership. States privatized land as if it were just another public asset, and in general, the transfer of these public assets to private hands was surrounded by corruption. with North American corporations paying ridiculously low prices to corrupt governments. These few resources, which were supposed to be for a fair distribution of wealth to the people, only served to create newly rich politicians. Thus, the privatization of land, often carried out with little regulation or oversight, led to a massive transfer of wealth from the public to private hands. This created an environment where large corporations and wealthy individuals could acquire vast tracts of land. In many cases, this resulted in the concentration of land ownership in the hands of a few wealthy individuals and corporations. Land inequality became more pronounced, impacting local communities. The consequences were predictable: rising land prices, increasing inequality, and a growing sense of injustice. Affected communities began to protest, demanding a fairer and more equitable distribution of resources. As land speculation intensified, the cost of housing skyrocketed. For those who owned their homes, this was a windfall, or so they think, because the reality is that they don't have any net gain, since their children will have to pay much more for the same houses. It's a terrible reality. But for renters, it was a disaster. Renters found themselves caught in a vice, squeezed by rising rents and stagnant wages. The consequences of this housing crisis were profound. Families were forced to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. Homelessness increased, and the social fabric of communities was strained to the breaking point. The dream of home ownership, once a cornerstone of the middle class, became increasingly unattainable for many. Section 6. Eroding productivity gains. The negative impacts of land speculation reached far beyond the housing market. As the cost of land went up, so did the cost of doing business. Small businesses in particular found it harder and harder to compete with larger corporations that could afford sky-high rents. This had a chilling effect on innovation and entrepreneurship. Instead of investing in new products and services, businesses were forced to put more and more of their resources just into keeping up with rising rents. This in turn led to slower economic growth and stagnant wages for workers. Section 7. A global crisis. The problems tied to land speculation aren't limited to just one country or region. From the favelas of Rio de Janeiro to the slums of Mumbai, the destabilizing effects of land speculation are felt worldwide. The 2008 global financial crisis, for example, was largely driven by a speculative bubble in the American housing market. The crisis highlighted how connected global financial markets are and the dangers of unchecked speculation. It also stressed the urgent need for a fairer and more sustainable approach to land ownership and development. Section 8. Breaking the cycle. Addressing the challenges posed by land speculation requires a multi-pronged approach. Governments must play an active role in eliminating speculation on both urban and rural land. They must curb speculation and ensure that land is used in a way that benefits the common good. Now, eliminating land speculation, while it may seem like a complicated challenge, there are effective solutions that can be implemented simply by implementing a tax on vacant lots. This tax would be applied as if the land were developed, which would encourage owners to develop their properties instead of keeping them empty, hoping their value will increase. A vacant lot tax, as if it were developed, would make housing affordable, even at the level of the tax itself. But even better, the money collected would be enough to eliminate all other harmful taxes. Thus, the people would achieve the true economic freedom so touted by Mr. Hayek. At the same time as eliminating all taxes and replacing them with just one tax on the pure value of the land, we will create a new alternative model of land ownership. To dignify it, to restore its role as a vital natural resource. It would be a way to nationalize the land of the landowners for the people, and it would not be necessary to confiscate or expropriate a single square meter. It is enough to put that tax on vacant and unused land of $200 a year. This way we can prioritize affordability, sustainability, and community control over land. Section 9. Towards a more equitable future. Friedrich Hayek's legacy, along with his stance on land speculation, combined with eliminating all taxes and replacing them with a single tax on the pure value of land, takes shape. This is how Hayek's perspective is complete and makes sense. His ideas about the importance of economic freedom without government intervention are even more relevant and valid today. However, his work also serves as a warning about the dangers of unchecked land market forces. Land speculation, if left unchecked, can undermine the very foundations of a free and prosperous society. By adopting a more balanced and equitable approach to land ownership, we can create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. A world where the right to housing is secure, where communities are empowered, and where the benefits of economic growth are shared more widely. This is the challenge of our time. The global economic crisis and the lack of access to housing are interconnected problems that require an urgent solution. It's time to act and put an end to land speculation, prioritizing people's well-being over economic profit.